Hello, this is a Freethought Forum, a program brought to you by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And I'm Joe Barnhart.
And I'm Jonas Holdeman. And we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
And we're going to talk about some free-thinking Christians, too, to see what kind of bridging we got. This is a call-in show. However, we have only one phone line, so if you can't get through, tweet to us at FFTVKnox. That's at FFTVKnox.
The Rationalist of East Tennessee has monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings, usually lectures with lively roundtable discussion. The second Sunday is a book club. The fourth Sunday is a reflections gathering, which is a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home. A comment, this week we'll have the book club, and they will be discussing the Jefferson Bible.
It's been in controversy recently. Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson didn't like all of the supernatural stuff, found that difficult to deal with, and so he crossed all that out and produced the Bible free of supernatural actions.
Yeah, he found the teachings of Jesus to be quite impressive, and he thought that they didn't need supernaturalism mixed in with it, and that was his viewpoint on it. We'll deal with that in another program, perhaps. The Atheist Society of Knoxville has a fun meeting at a restaurant or bar, and tonight is at Barley's, tonight after the show, and then on Friday at the Field House atop Bearden Hill. That's at the Field House on Friday. So to find it, when you go in, look for the book in the silver jacket copy. The book's called The God Delusion.
Okay, today is September 4th, 2012, and we'll be talking about bridging theism and atheism. But first, in the news. Now, this is something that I'm kind of proud of. If you look at the Freedom from Religion Foundation website, one of the first things is you'll find is an announcement about promoting the fact that 3 Tennessee students have received awards from the Freedom of Religion Foundation. The first one I want to talk about is Maya Dispro, if I may read from here. A 12-year-old from Hickson, Tennessee, down by Chattanooga, has received $1,000 as a student activist from the Freedom of Religion Foundation this month for speaking before the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners to ask them to drop government prayer. She becomes the 5th and youngest student to receive a student activist award from FFRF in 2012. The 3rd student awardee from Tennessee this year. The others are, I'll talk about in a minute. But the thing I'm proud about is that Maya has been, well, since she was 8 years old, has been a camper at Camp Crest of the Smoky Mountains. Maya is very small. She seems kind of shy, but so I was quite surprised to hear about her speaking up. I talked to Chloe, and Chloe said, "Oh yeah, Maya's very smart." Maya got involved when she accompanied her father to a board meeting where she spoke up against the government prayers and witnessed the board giving special awards to the preacher. Maya decided on her own that she wanted to speak against prayers at the meeting. She said, "I realized there were some things I'd like to say to them. It took me a while to decide because even though I go to a middle school for arts that is supposed to accept everyone, I was worried. During elementary school, I was bullied about my beliefs, and whenever the subject of my religion or lack thereof came up, my social status dropped for a few days. When I realized that the county commissioners were actually behaving like a bunch of fifth grade bullies, I sat down and started writing my address to them. Now, Camp Crest of the Smoky Mountains is something special to both of us because it originated from Joe in a role like John the Baptist, Joe the Baptist, out promoting this idea of doing something for the kids, and it finally came about, and so I'm director of the camp, and Joe is the
I just had an idea. You do the work.
The god of the camp. Okay. The other of the three students is Crystal Myers, who we've talked about before, student from Lenore City High School, who had her. She was head of the school newspaper, editor of the school newspaper, and on the swim team, and really a leader in the school. And she wrote an article on what it was like to be an atheist, and it got sanctioned, got cut off by the school administrators. Now they used the usual argument that well, it might cause disruption if this kind of things were published. But you know, I find this is kind of like liar, liar, pants on fire.
Well, it's interesting. As I mentioned on this program once before, the Baptists caused disruption in New England with their radical views, and they hanged several of them because they had the notion that government is not in charge of prayer. And government prayers they regarded to be a sacrilege. Not religious, but a sacrilege.
Yeah. Okay. Crystal, where was I going with this? I'm getting too old for this.
Well, welcome to the club.
Crystal attracted a lot of attention, Joe.
Yeah.
And there were articles to the editor in the newspaper, letters to the editor. But afterwards, the teacher who had been, I think, in charge of student publications, the high school newspaper, and the school yearbook, was threatened to be fired. He was given, as I understand it, the choice of either accepting a demotion or being fired, and in fact he was demoted and sent to the to teach English at the middle school.
No, we don't. I don't know that to be the case, but that's a rumor, or is
well,
it?
no, that's what's been reported in the media.
In the media,
and
okay.
You know, I can document it. So I think it's tragic that people will speak out in support of the children, but not for a really conscientious person who is giving them an opportunity to express.
If they wanted to use the case, you could make a case like this. You don't use the public school and public media to promote a particular religion, including atheism. You can make that case. But I don't think that's what the issue was about, because there are too many people using the public media when they shouldn't be to promote their particular religion. I think it's mostly, at least it'd be worth looking into, was this just a bias against atheists?
Well, the letter noted disturbing allegations, according to this report, about school-sanctioned prayer during the current school year, including at swim meets, football games, and where the public address system is used. And so really that's the kind of thing she was speaking out against.
Yeah.
And clearly
Gotcha.
And finally, there's this Chef Shot, and this I think will produce a bit of a chuckle. He was a student at Spring Hill, and at Spring Hill, they had this day, dress like your favorite fictional character, and he came to school dressed as his favorite fictional character, Jesus Christ. And so he was met by the principal and the assistant principal and the school resource officer, you know, that's the policeman and everything, and told that his dress was unacceptable. But he also received one of these $1,000 awards from the Freedom from FFRF.
Well, I think this should have been humor. No, I mean, how do we know what Jesus wore in the first place for sure? I know he may have liked shirts like Larry Rhodes, for all I know, or a coat of many colors.
Well, you know, Joe, I think that this situation needs to be addressed, and one organization which addresses it is the Secular Student Alliance. They have chapters at different colleges, but also high school chapters where
you know what's interesting?
It can be a sanctioned club.
A lot of, since we're talking about bridging atheism and Christianity, a lot of Baptists would agree with what you're saying today. As a matter of fact, Baptists disagree among themselves on this. One Baptist said to Jimmy Carter, who's a well-known Southern Baptist, I hope you can give up your secular humanism. You see? And what I'm suggesting is there are a lot of values that cross over. In other words, what I'm saying, what you're talking about, there are many theists who would agree with this. Now, if you're in the Soviet Union, where atheism used to be the predominant, the atheists there act like theocrats want to act over here. That is, they want to use the government to control people's thinking and to ridicule other people's thinking.
Now, when Joe talks about Baptist, Joe is in the know. Joe graduated from a local Baptist college.
Yeah,
and
very good school.
And
Carson Newman College, yeah.
And was a Baptist minister for a while. And I think his story of how he...
Well, I graduated from the Southern Baptist Seminary after college, which at that time was an exceedingly good theology school. Unfortunately, they fired 15 professors, and a group of Calvinist fundamentalists took over, and that was a big battle that took place.
But I think what happened there was a process of an evolution from one world viewpoint to another, and that is a lot of the subject of today's...
But most people move bit by bit, and you can see people don't just throw themselves out of one boat into another. In fact, if you don't have another one, you don't throw yourself out. You take apart one part of the boat that you think is rotten and put in a new plank if you can. And most people modify gradually. Because you don't know enough to jump from one view to another. You just look back and say, my goodness, over the years I've changed more than I thought. You see, most people change, and it seems. You just don't say have a conversion overnight.
So Joe went on to become professor of philosophy and religion at North Texas State University, author of many books, and a well-traveled speaker. And so I think he's an authority, in my opinion, on the subject that we'll be talking about today.
Well, I've done some work on it. I don't know if that's embarrassing to say that you're an authority on anything. No, I've never been accused of modesty, so don't. But let's move on.
Okay.
Let's mention the fact that the Atheist Society and the Rationalists of East Tennessee, Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist Society of East Tennessee sponsored this program along with some other friends, and we're very grateful for that. And a person the other day asked me, why would an atheist join a church? And I thought that was an interesting question, and I did explain that some do and some don't. Depends on the church. Okay, go ahead. You were having more to say.
Joe, you have a page there that I don't have.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah. This should have been in, folks, before the in the news. So
You're right here.
We've talked about the Rationalists of East Tennessee, Sunday activities, and the book club coming up this week at Barnes and Noble, and people are invited to drop in, and you don't have to have read the book before you come, but it's a very good book.
Okay, now let's get on to the program. And what's the first question we got to deal with?
Okay. Joe gave me these questions to ask.
Let's go.
Okay. So, Joe, the first question is, what is the ancient Hebrew word for nature? And does the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament refer to nature?
Well, as far as I can piece together, there is no Hebrew word, and maybe one of our callers can correct me, and I'd be very pleased to be corrected, but I can't find a Hebrew word for nature. Now that's significant.
Ancient Hebrew.
Ancient Hebrew, yeah, that's a good distinction. That the Hebrew Bible is written in what we'd call ancient Hebrew, compared to what modern Jewish scholars write in Yiddish or something like that. Now, there is, however, in ancient Greek, among the Greeks, a word for nature, and it's physis, from which we get our word physics.
Oh.
And now the reason I think that's important is by not having a concept of nature, then their world was highly anthropomorphic. Now, science studies nature, but if you don't have nature, then what do you study is the problem. And I think that's why you did not have in antiquity, one reason you didn't have science is they didn't have the concepts to make that possible. Now, among the Greeks, you did have among the pre-Socratics and Socrates and Plato, an attempt to move toward a more systematically developed philosophical view, out of which developed modern science.
Yeah. Now the people who wrote the Bible were not stupid. I mean, they were just like us. They had problems that they experienced, trying to understand the world around them and trying to integrate themselves into a society that they could get along.
That's a really good point. Is that here you and it's important for us to put ourselves in their place. That's before Galileo, before science, and they are trying to explain the world with their equipment, the same as we're doing. And so the Hebrew Bible is, they mostly had an anthropomorphic view, that there's some cosmic wills who are consciously causing tornadoes and floods and wars and all of this. Whereas today, we don't think tornadoes are caused by cosmic consciousness. There's no one plans a tornado. An earthquake can be indirectly, maybe by pumping oil or water in or out, but we understand it more as part of nature.
I wish that were universally true, but there are fringe elements who blame certain natural events on as expressing the wrath of God.
Well, yeah, you've got the Jerry Falwells of the world, but they're off the map in terms of trying to explain things in a contemporary world. We'll deal with this next time. When the towers were crashed into by these more fanatic versions of the Muslim religion, Falwell had the strange notion that could be explained as God visiting America with punishment. Now, he borrowed that from about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and he hasn't, that's pretty much where Falwell lived in his theoretical framework. Now, when it came to technology, he had a television station, you see. But in terms
Yeah.
of science, he belonged about 3,000 years ago. But now that's not true of all theists. In fact, the Southern Baptist Seminary right now has a president complaining about what he calls atheists in the pulpit. You see, and what he can't understand very well is there are degrees of changes that people make over the centuries in their thinking. And he's back there with John Calvin in many ways, and that's 1600s or earlier even. In fact, among Catholics you had developed what's called natural theology. And that's a view that you try to put reason and the science of that time together to see what kind of view you could come up with. And that's Thomas Aquinas, who died around 1270 AD. He had 5 arguments or 5 ways for the existence of a God. But he was trying to do it by reason, and that was called natural theology.
Yeah,
Now,
well before the age of reason.
Well, that way
Enlightenment.
before Copernicus, yeah. I mean he knew nothing about the age of reason. But he was doing the best he could at that time. I mean, he went in great detail trying to explain what angels were like. Not that he had any information, but he was just speculating. You know? And then you had among the Protestants developing later the notion of a general revelation. By that they meant a divine revelation that doesn't come just through the Hebrews or through the Christians or through just the Hindus. It's revelation for around the world. And that's what scientists today and others in technology, people in technology and just ordinary common sense, that's what everybody is trying to do. We call it common sense, common consensus, and it's called general or common revelation. Sometimes it's called common grace. And then you had among these Protestants the notion of special revelation, and that's what they thought they had in the Bible. And you can find in the history of Christian theology a constant tension between these two. I have, for example, a wonderful teacher who held to the resurrection of Jesus, and that's special revelation, you see. He also believed in evolution, and that's general revelation. He tried to put these two together. And you find these kind of, and then in the history of the churches now, you find some groups emphasizing general revelation more, some emphasizing special revelation more. And so that's where a lot of the conflict is in between. Those who are emphasizing more special revelation without paying much attention to general revelation are much more prone to want to get into politics and to enforce their religion through politics.
Yeah, unfortunately, their visibility and influence far exceeds their wisdom.
Well, that's quite interesting, is they are good in media. In fact, they may be better than those who are interested in general revelation. I think that's a very interesting thing. They're not as much interested in showmanship either. But I think, well, the general revelation then is where I think the impact of Galileo and Copernicus and later Darwin and the theologians are saying, if God is constantly revealing himself in nature, then you've got to study it, and you can't say, well, God, here's what you have to believe or do. You find out what nature is doing. And that's where Einstein comes in, it seems to me, and Spinoza. They began to say the world of nature has order and structure and energy. And that sounds like we're getting toward physics, doesn't it? and it's cosmology. And the cosmos means order, by the way. And so that's what impressed these men. And the wife of Einstein, by the way, who's been underrated.
Which wife?
Yeah, the earlier one.
The first, the one who was a physicist.
The mathematician, yeah. Yeah. But anyhow, and Jefferson, you mentioned Jefferson. Jefferson was aware that science was developing, and he saw the general revelation. He was a theist or a deist, that God created the world. That's general revelation, and it's got order and structure and the laws of nature. And so he thought, if you mess that up with a lot of miracles, you create chaos. So that's what you mentioned, the Jefferson Bible. He thought supernaturalism was to mess up creation. And he thought this religion and what he called priestcraft is really a violation of real religion, he thought.
So Jefferson still left room for a God, but in a different sense, a God, the creator, who created
perpetually
the universe, but it didn't need to be there to maintain it.
Well, put it this way. You've had big debates among Christians on this. And I say Christians because there are different kinds of Christians. Let me give you an example, and draw me back to what you just said. On television, I saw this recently. Some evangelicals were interviewing some Mormons, and later the evangelicals were making the commentary, and they were contending Mormons are not Christians. Okay? Now, what I'm saying is the word Christian, like the word God, has a diversity of meanings, and you have to find out how people are using the word. Now, I didn't bring with me, I left it because I left in a hurry, but in high school, I read a book called The Chaos of Cults, and it was written by an evangelical Christian in the Reformed tradition, and it listed what he called cults, and they used it in a college, in a religious college, and it had all the religions that he didn't agree with. Basically, had Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, spiritualism, and a lot of other things that he called them all cults. But many of these call themselves Christians. Now, what I'm saying is that there are great diversity among Christians. And part of it is this general revelation and special revelation.
Okay, Joe, I think we have a...
press that on and let's see.
Phone call. Hello, caller. Welcome to Freethought Forum. Would you give us a name or nickname by which we may refer to you, please?
Yes, Joe.
Yes.
Joe. You're Joe and Joe. Well, tell us what do you have for us today?
Woo!
Okay. That reminds me of the song, Jose, can you sing? Okay.
Oh, well, consider the source.
Okay. That's funny. The word Joe is built on Joseph, means to add. So he added in, I guess. Thank you, Jose. Okay. You mentioned what is the word, or we did, I don't know whether you and I raised Jefferson's deism.
Yes.
A deism is a version of theism, or a belief that God is the sustainer and the perpetual creator of the energy and the structure and the order that we today call nature. And it runs strictly it runs on schedule, put it that way. Otherwise, if you didn't have that predictability, you and I couldn't exist. We rely, as you well know better than I do, you're a physicist. Without this, a high degree of predictability, at least on the macrocosmic level, you and I couldn't survive.
Yeah, kind of the sense of causality and predictability is built into our nature, because there have been experiments with very young babies and they show a sense of causality. They express astonishment when kind of sleight of hand is pulled on them, so that they don't understand how that.
They're part of nature, and part of our survival mechanism is learn to have expectations, but we live in a world of nature, and so some of our expectations don't pay off, and we have to learn to make corrections living in nature. And that's where the laws of nature are important. We have to learn how nature behaves so we can behave accordingly.
Okay, Joe, we have another call here.
Good. Go ahead.
Hello, caller. Please give us a name.
My name is Josh.
Josh. And what can we do for you today, Josh?
Well, my question's of intricate nature here. I wanted to know if you guys thought Ric Flair was either Christian or Mormon.
Say again?
Well, I don't know, it's like a dog barking in the street. What is your response? Okay, going on. Well, we did mention that there was a debate among some Christians don't want to claim that Mormons are Christians, and some Mormons insist they are Christians. My point is that it is not my job to tell people what words mean. My job is to find out how they're using their words and then hold them to account so that they are consistent. And that's all the dictionary does, by the way. A dictionary didn't drop in out of the sky. I remember working with a dean in California, and this dean's job was to keep track of how certain words were being used. And then he would record those, and of course eventually that was in the dictionary. If you get the Oxford English Dictionary, you can see the history of how a particular word was being used over the centuries and modified. Take in the King James Bible, take therefore no thought for tomorrow. The word thought there means something like worry or anxiety. It doesn't mean, in other words, in that day, the word thought is a little different from what it means today. So it is not saying don't think about tomorrow, you see. It's don't have anxiety about tomorrow. That's what the word thought meant. And you can find that meaning in the King James Bible and in the Hamlet, which came out about 1611, about the time of the King James Bible, somewhere around the same time.
Well, let me pose a question for you here. First, I suppose, just kind of as an aside, Jefferson still acknowledges the story of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah.
So one could imagine the idea of a Christian as one who follows the teachings of the man. So in that sense, you could have an atheist who would also be a Christian.
In that sense of the word.
In a natural sense.
Yeah, or you could have an atheist who could be a Buddhist. In fact, there is a book published by a Methodist publishing house, comparing Buddhism, the teachings of Buddhism, and the teachings of Christianity and Jesus together. And that's a Methodist publishing house.
Okay, Joe, we have another call, and I hope this is a little more productive.
I hope it's
hello, caller. Well,
okay. He's been drinking more than cherry juice, apparently. Okay. Let's go into our next topic then. You had a question about naturalism comes up. There is a word, naturalism, as over against supernaturalism. And you can have a religious naturalist, and it's built on the word nature. And just saying, we have our ideals and our goals and our values, and we have to interact with nature. Otherwise, we're living in a fantasy world. And so our values are important not to just be natural, We want to be more than just natural in the sense of just doing what's come naturally.
Okay. Hold that thought. We have another phone call.
Okay.
Hello, caller. Could we have a name or a nickname, please, by which we could refer to you?
Yes, my nickname is Tara Shed.
Okay.
Tara.
I was very interested in what you were saying earlier about the young people expressing their displeasure with the reading of biblical phrases at different public events, and I was very impressed with the young people that you described. So I have a two-point question. Number one, I'd like for you to talk more about the young people and about Camp Quest. And number two, since the other gentleman seems to want to get into politics, but I thought your topic was the Jeffersonian Bible, maybe he could compare and contrast how the difference between the Jefferson modifying the Bible relates to how Mormons modify the Bible.
I didn't get the last, but I think I know what she was getting at.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly comment. I just love these children. They're really bright, and many of them come there and have some very deep conversations among themselves. Doesn't require adults to provide any guidance. In fact, we just don't do that. But I just love those kids, and there's quite a difference in their level of sophistication and understanding of their developing worldview as function of age and experience and so on.
Well, our topic really wasn't Jefferson Bible. It was broader, but let's go back to it because it's an interesting topic and it fits in with what we're talking about.
Okay.
Well, that's what you were talking about before the call came in, is that Jefferson was saying that the teachings of Jesus, and there are teachings in the Bible that make sense and have a lot of wisdom, and that would be true of Plato. That would be true of Aristotle. But you don't deify Aristotle. You don't deify Plato. You don't deify the Bible to make it infallible. You say this is, I think, what you were saying earlier, is these are people trying to get wisdom and understanding and how to live in their world. Is that what you were?
Yeah.
But excuse me, is the caller still here?
What was your question again?
My question is, if you're speaking about the Jeffersonian Bible, you're speaking about how Jefferson modified the Bible. I'm asking you to compare and contrast that to how the Mormons have modified, quote, the Bible.
Yeah, very good. That's good.
This modification by Jefferson was more of a deletion and striking out and not creating.
Okay, let me, this is a very good question. In fact, all religions have really modified previous religions. You could write an entire book. In fact, books have been written on it. How religions modify previous religions. In upper state New York, you had a great, to talk about the Book of Mormon now. Now that was after Jefferson. You had a great conflict among Christians as to which was the true religion. Part of this was because of the Campbellite movement. Now, Alexander Campbell said, we want to get back to the original New Testament. And in other words, all these other denominations have added on too much. He wanted to get back to the original. Sounds good. That ended up creating 3 other denominations, one of which was the Church of Christ, you see. Now, what Campbell's wanted to get back just to the New Testament primarily. Joseph Smith saw this controversy going on among Baptists, Methodists, Campbellites, Catholics, and others. And so he came up with a notion that he had a new scripture altogether.
Yeah, a new revelation.
A new revelation, which he claimed was on golden plates. And he, by divine revelation, was able to translate them from a language he didn't know. But when you're into supernaturalism, you can do whatever. It's like Harry Potter. You can do it. And then
You're in the supernatural when you're in the Bible.
the Bible's got a lot of supernatural in it, yeah. And then
Right.
and he added on to it. Jefferson was the opposite of Joseph Smith. He wanted to say there's an awful lot in the Bible that is not supernaturalism. It's a lot of wisdom. Let's clean it up. And that's what the Jefferson Bible, it seems to me, is about.
So basically, he left the wisdom and took out those things that are beyond our the kind of things we experience.
From his point of view, it just didn't make sense, all of these supernatural miracles. The problem is any so-called prophet can just get in his head. Went up to the third heaven or wherever and got some supposed revelation, came back and wrote it down or spoke it if he were illiterate and somebody else could take it down. Yeah. Later on, you had in time of Christianity, but before Joseph Smith, you had in the Near East, the Muslim world still having controversy among Christians over the nature of Christ, whether you had two natures or one nature, and all of these controversies going on. The Monophysites, and so...
The caller again, if I can get a word in edgewise.
Go ahead.
I appreciated the analogy that the Jefferson's revision was by deletion and the more
Go ahead.
modifications were by addition. But my question is, if you call Jefferson had left the wisdom, then does that mean you're passing judgment on what the Mormons added as being not wisdom? And the one last question I have, and then I'll let you gentlemen go. Have either of you seen part of or even heard of a television series called Big Love, specifically about Mormonism?
No, that's not the play in New York.
No.
No. This was a long-playing television series dealing with the multiple wives.
Okay, I can talk about that. First of all, Mormonism now in Utah has made that against their rule, polygamy, okay?
I asked if you had seen the series Big Love.
Yes, I know what you're talking about now, yeah.
I have not.
Seen it.
Yeah. By the way, the speaker, I think I know the speaker was invited to be on this program, okay? And be glad to have you come on with us. Okay, go ahead, your next question now.
I'm done with questions.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to the polygamy.
Well, thank you. We'll
Bye-bye.
make the line open for another caller.
But she raised a very interesting question. Here's a good example of religions dividing among themselves or adding on to themselves. The Mormons added on polygamy after the Christians had done away with it. He went back to the Hebrew Bible to get polygamy, you see? Mm-hmm. Now, in order to get statehood, they had to do away with polygamy. Now, here's what happens. Yeah. Over in northern Arizona, you have, I think it's in Colorado City, I'd have to look it up. In fact, Mary and I visited this. Part of my job would be to, since I taught religion in American society, I had to go around and visit groups. I mean, that was my job. So we went over there in northern Arizona to visit this group of polygamists. They're called fundamentalist Mormons, but the Orthodox Mormons don't claim that anymore because that's how they had to negotiate to get statehood. Yeah, go ahead. We've got another good caller. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, sir.
Yes.
Hi. I've noticed a van driving around my neighborhood offering free cake and cookies to children. Am I kidding? And they Lord proselytize these children. But the thing is, this is a state community. It used to be called very.
I'm not getting it.
And what can we do about it as a community?
We're having some trouble with our communication system, so...
You mentioned an ice cream truck, and that's all we could get. I'm sorry. Can you do it again?
Okay. I wanted to say ice cream. It's like a cookie and van. It's a van. They drive around with a speaker on top, offering free cake and cookies to children. And then they go and have a Bible class, sit them all down and have a Bible class. And it's a state-run community, Northridge. Used to be called Christenberry Heights, right here in Knoxville. My question is, I know it seems like, to me, it seems like a blatant violent church-state separation, but what can we do about it as a community? What do you think?
I guess I would have to get some idea of what kind of threat you feel that it might be to your community, as to how you might deal with it, and the actions should be kind of proportional to the threat. If you don't see any real physical threat to your children, and any threat might be kind of the way they're trying to influence the children. Well,
I don't know whether you'd have to...
That's absolutely what they're trying to do, is influence the children.
You could argue this is going into a neighborhood on the streets and doing preaching, and you may have to have a license from the city to do that on public. In other words, freedom of religion says if you have private property, you have a right to propagate your religion. Now the question is whether or not you take public property and set up a little religion station. That's another squirrely issue, and that may be what this is about.
Yeah, what you might do if you find this objectionable is to check and see whether a license is required and what kind of ordinances might govern this, and
actually,
and at least see that they stay within the accepted laws and ordinances.
And if you're a parent, you can go up and talk with him and argue with him.
Yeah, okay. that might. I think too often we, instead of taking a personal initiative and trying to solve problems, we want to involve government officials, the state, the police, or...
I would go out and talk with him.
A first step might be to discuss the matter with them, and they may be perfectly amenable to going somewhere else.
Well, go on with some of our other things.
Okay, so is anything else?
Well, I'm just, I'm concerned about these children. I mean, I was raised and basically brainwashed by these cults, and it took me many years to get out of it, and it ruined a lot of opportunities in my life. So yeah, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Hustling kids on the street, that's a big problem, and I think parents just have to go out and deal with them.
Okay, well, thank you for calling.
Thank
you very much. Okay. Well, you want to talk some more about Jefferson then? Or Charles Hartshorn? Or Jefferson wasn't our major topic, but I think it's a good topic to get into what we were...
we've got about 10 minutes, I think, left, and what can we...
Well, let me mention Hartshorn, because it comes out of that Jeffersonian tradition, too. Hartshorn, Charles Hartshorn, is a panentheist who holds that the universe itself is nature, and in many respects, it's the embodiment of God. Now, what I think you and I were trying to get at is the meaning of a word is the way people use it. And the word God means a lot of different things to different people. Now, some people have just knee-jerk on the word God. I mean, they really go in ballistics, one way or the other. But most of us want to find out, well, what are people trying to... When Einstein uses the word God, we think he has a right to use it. We have a right to find out what he means by it. See?
Yes.
And in other words, there is no absolute definition that's around the world of that word. And Einstein means, I think, the way I studied him, is that's his word for saying that the world of nature is orderly and structured. And he said very clearly to a rabbi, God is not interested in your particular life. And I think he borrows from Spinoza. That's the same as saying nature is not really watching over your particular, who you're going to get married to. You can't say, I'm following nature's will. And
there'd be too many conflicts of interest. I mean, we all have to eat to survive.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a conflict of interest.
Well, people, physicists like Hawking will talk about awe, A-W-E, of nature. And I met Carl Sagan in New York. We had a common meeting together, and I heard him speak quite a bit of awe of nature. And that's a religious term traditionally, but I think what that means is, well, you tell me what when you hear the word awe, what do you?
I think it's kind of an emotional response to some external stimulus, such as a scene, a view, a sound, music, and so on. So it's kind of a state or feeling in the mind that arises from different kind of stimuli.
Yeah, that makes so. And that is it close to not humiliation. That's different. Humility, in the sense that if you're a scientist, of all people, scientists should be humble because they see how vast the system is and how very tiny we are in this universe. In that sense, it's awesome.
Yes.
I think this is the way Freud uses the word, if I'm understanding what he's talking about.
Just looking at some of these photographs from of distant galaxies and nebula and so on, they are awe-inspiring to me to try to conceive of the immensity of the universe from these just sample views, I think is...
Yeah, that puts us in perspective of ourselves.
Yeah.
When you think about it, a lot of us just barely got here. Now, I remember talking to a pan-atheist theologian, Charles Hartshorne. We were at a meeting together. We were on the same program at a university in Texas. And I said, if I understand what you're saying, God, as you understand how you're using the word, could not have predicted the emergence of the human race. And he first protested, and then I said, well, I have a quote from you on this and that. He said, yeah, I see. I mean, he was a lot older than I am, and he had done a lot more reading. He lived to be 103.
Yeah,
and he saw given his notion of novelty and unpredictability that we were talking about before this meeting in physics, God cannot, even from a pan-atheist point of view, predict all the future.
Yeah. If humanity were so inevitable, why did it take 800 million years after the first appearance of life to reach this point? I mean, it's just kind of an instant in time, and I'm afraid, Joe, that I feel the instant has a limit.
Our limit. We're about over halfway through, if not almost through. We've got more things to say here.
Okay, so let's take a break here, and well, here.
It's time to start. If you got a pen.
Well, wait a minute. This is something we're supposed to have at the mid-program.
Okay.
In case you're tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions, which, well, I won't say anything. This show's alive most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on the community access television. And it's a call-in show, as those of you who have been watching can recognize.
Would you say that in physics, everything, this fits with process theology, if I'm understanding that everything, if X exists, it cannot exist except as it interrelates with a lot of other things. Nobody has self-contained substance. Or no thing, no entity.
I can't dispute that.
Okay, this is partly what the process philosophers are thinking. That everything is, and in a way, this is what science is about, is studying the relationships. And that's what the law, in fact, those relationships are as real as the units. The units would be nothing without the interactive relationships.
Yeah, and the little short reading that I've done on process philosophy, it seemed to be in response or a contrast with the Aristotelian concepts of idealized attributes, talking about beauty and circles and all of this kind of stuff, and instead tries to explain things as in terms of a process of evolving. So I read something about so what is Aristotle? If Aristotle gets sick, he's still Aristotle. But the process approach, I think, would think of Aristotle from being a child through an adult, and if he developed Alzheimer's in his old age, which he didn't.
But that's a good point. Are you the same person?
Then at what point would he cease to be Aristotle, even though his body persisted? Well,
had a woman tell Marianne and me once, said, my husband is not the man I married. She was 58. I said, would you want to be married to a 21-year-old? She was 21.
Oh, okay. Well, Joe, we have to close now, so it's time to wrap things up. And we hope that if you think of something you would like to ask, please tweet us or send emails to freethoughtforum@yahoo.com, or you can call and give us feedback at voicemail 865-272-9060. And we've enjoyed being here with you, virtually with you, and hope you have a good week.
And actual reality.